A salt-tinged breeze slid across Blackwater Bay, gentle as a lover's sigh, carrying the briny perfume of the narrow sea toward the jagged walls of Dragonstone. Jon Snow stood upon the basalt parapet, where ancient Valyrian builders had carved 1,000 dragon gargoyles to leer forever at the tide. In the lowering dusk, their stone eyes glimmered, as though lit within by smoldering coals. He felt them judging him. Stark bastard, oathbreaker, kinslayer. Yet it was not their gaze that set the hairs at his nape to rise. It was the answering thrum in his blood, the same tremor that had haunted every waking moment since the first time he'd stretched a gloved hand toward Viserion's cream and gold muzzle, and the dragon had leaned into his touch as a hound might. He could still taste the furnace heat on his lips from that first flight. Burning salt, scorching wind, the metallic tang of his own terror swallowed entire by exultation. Across the sky, he and the dragon had writhed like a single newborn creature. In that hour, he understood ancient Valyria's arrogance, felt the pulse of a power older than kings, older than men. And when he landed, when Viserion's claws crunched the wet grit of Dragonstone's beach, the beast had laid his great head upon the sand like an offering. Jon had scraped both knees kneeling beside him, forehead pressed to pale scales still radiating heat. The memory steadied him now as he listened to Davos Seaworth murmur numbers beside him. Ships tallied from the parapet lights of the fleet assembling under the crescent moon. Cogs from Storm's End, half-burnt galleys scavenged at black tide. Myrish swift sails taken from the wreck of Saladhor Saan's ambitions. So few masts, so few men, Davos kept repeating, like a prayer of disbelief. Jon's answer was silence. He no longer measured strength in hulls or helms. Power rode curling talons, glowed within slitted pupils, the color of molten amber. And though he feared what that power might yet cost him, might cost the world, he also knew that every breath he drew henceforth had been bought by fire. A clatter of boots on stone announced Tyrion Lannister, face shadowed by torchlight, but eyes bright with anticipation. "The Raven from Old Town just arrived," he said, voice brisk in the chill. "Daenerys' fleet was sighted midday, 2 days' sail south of the Stepstones. A delay, contrary winds perhaps, but she'll make Blackwater Bay soon enough." Jon's gloved fingers tightened on the parapet. He pictured the silver-haired queen aboard her flagship, unsullied shields glittering like river ice around her, golden braid whipping in the wind. She would expect welcome fires on Dragonstone. She would expect allegiance. She would not expect to find King's Landing already bowed beneath northern banners and the three-headed dragon sewn over Direwolf Grey. He turned to Tyrion. "We sail at dawn." Davos sucked in a sharp breath. "And pray tell, how do we dock at the capital without a blockade?" "We do not dock," Jon said. "Viserion and I will break the walls where Aegon once broke them. The fleet joins once the gates stand open." "Them?" Tyrion's mouth twisted with wry amusement that could not mask the worry behind his mismatched eyes. The last Targaryen to loose Dragonflame over King's Landing met an unfortunate end, if memory serves. "Aerys never dared the sky," Jon replied. He hid in shadowed halls with wildfire beneath his floor. "I'll be above, where every man can see what comes for them. Above, where only archers and scorpions might answer." A thought that flitted across his mind like a swallow at twilight. But Viserion's scales had turned aside bolts forged in Qarth, shattered Myrish quarrels mid-air, and there was no time left for hesitance. The realm tore itself apart while queens and kings marched in spirals. Winter deepened its jaws. Every passing day fed the armies of the dead beyond the wall. He could not wait for Daenerys to weigh counsel. He could not gamble that Cersei would concede without blood. A clean strike now, one decisive hammerfall, might spare tens of thousands. And so, under the candlelit gloom of the council chamber, he laid out a plan as spare and brutal as the North in midwinter. The fleet would feign a fishing convoy, hugging the coastline past Cratclaw Point. At first light, Viserion would spear for the Red Keep's highest turret, roaring white-hot fury across the battlements, shattering Lannister morale. The small folk, he prayed, would scatter to the riverbanks, not burn. Tyrion penned letters in his cramped, deft script, addressing them to every gold cloak captain known to despise Cersei's cruelty, promising amnesty and coin for surrender. Davos dispatched his fastest longboat north to bring Sansa a single stark sentence. Hold Winterfell. When the Iron Throne falls, the realm will need a queen to rebuild. By midnight, ravens flapped from Dragonstone in all directions, black suggestions riding moonlit sky. Jon slept not at all. He paced the courtyard where Viserion dozed within a shattered ring wall. The dragon's exhalations rose like steam from a vent above some deep, churning furnace. Pale sails of membranous wing trembled each time Jon's boots scraped cinders. That living furnace awaited him, welcomed him. He tasted it in every breath. Shortly before dawn, as a gray ribbon frayed across the horizon, Missandei approached bearing a leather harness stitched overnight by 30 trembling islanders. She presented it to Jon wordlessly, bronze rings clinking like distant bells. He blinked at the unfamiliar weight of destiny sewn into jerky leather and steel. Then he nodded thanks and slung the harness over one shoulder, crossing to where Viserion's lidless eyes studied him. "I'll ask one thing," Jon murmured, palm against the dragon's brow. "Carry me swift. Carry me true. Let no innocent burn." Viserion's rumble could have been contempt or assent. Jon chose to believe the latter. With Davos' steady hands securing buckles around the beast's sinuous neck and Tyrion shouting last-minute instructions to the captains, Jon climbed between the great shoulders. He looked, just once, toward the dark outline of Dragonstone's keep, imagining ghosts at its windows. Stannis brooding, Shireen playing, Maester Cresson poisoned by his own resolve. Every stone here carried hauntings. Best to leave them in peace. He clutched the reins, a futile gesture he knew. Viserion flew where Viserion wished and whispered, "Dracarys." It was not a word of command so much as a promise. Flame roared from the dragon's throat into the pre-dawn gloom, painting sea spray gold. Wings hammered downward. Stone shattered beneath claw, and the world fell away. They skimmed the waves so low. Jon's boot toes cleaved sparkling furrows through crests. Gulls scattered in shrieking panic. Sunfire began to bloom beyond the horizon, smearing crimson across rippled water. Ahead, the mouth of Blackwater Rush yawned wide, flanked by sentry towers so familiar from tales that Jon half expected to glimpse wildfire still licking their soot-black stone. But the towers were quiet, their bells unringing, gold cloaks not yet awake enough to spy the pale leviathan skimming shoreward. Viserion gained height with a single vast downstroke. Air thinned and chilled, hissed past Jon's ears until breath labored in his chest. Far below, King's Landing unrolled like a tarnished brooch. Fleets of rooftops pressed shoulder to shoulder, sept spires stabbing the dawn, and at its heart, the Red Keep perched upon Egan's Hill. A garnet fist clenched around the realm's throat. Jon leaned forward and the dragon banked. Circling once above Flea Bottom. From up here, the alley seemed carved into a single breathing creature. Homes pulsing with smoke, markets already stirring, beggars' candles guttering on windowsills. He felt a pang of guilt as sharp as cold iron. Any misstep, any stray plume of dragonfire, would char lives measured in copper coins and crusts of bread. He would not misstep. Viserion screamed, a shriek of challenge that rattled the shutters of 100 hovels. Below, figures halted, heads tilting skyward. Somewhere a child pointed. A dog bolted, dragging its chain. Jon tugged the reins right. The dragon obeyed, angling for Maegor's holdfast where the lion flag still rippled crimson in the breeze. Trumpets blared, shrill and panicked, echoing off marble courtyards. Archers scrambled along parapets still in nightclothes. Bolts hissed upward like angry bees, falling far short. Viserion inhaled. Jon tightened his grip and shouted across the whistling wind, "Aim for the ramparts only, no lower." He doubted the dragon comprehended words, but the bond between them flared intuitive and bright. Flame lanced forth, a white gold torrent licking stone, slagging merlons, churning smoke so thick, Jon could taste soot through his scarf. Guards scattered as walls wept molten streaks. Jon banked again, searching for the massive bronze doors of the King's Gate. If those fell, the fleet could sail straight to the quays beneath the Red Keep. Wooden barricades shone slick with tar. Cersei's engineers had prepared to burn invaders alive, but they had not prepared for the sky. Viserion's jaws parted. A cone of fire engulfed the gates, tar erupting like oil on a forge. Wood shrieked, then collapsed inward amid a roar of sparks. Outside the walls, the first Stormlander cogs appeared, unfurling sail, men cheering at the conflagration. Jon felt triumph surge, wild as a wolf's howl, but he smothered it with discipline. The battle was not yet won. A dragon could raise a city faster than it could conquer one. He guided Viserion toward the throne room balcony, where tall windows overlooked the city. There, he suspected, Queen Cersei would be rousing her guards, shrieking orders. He meant to offer her surrender, public, undeniable. A Lannister queen bending the knee before the bastard son of Eddard Stark atop a dragon would spread across Westeros like sunrise. Fear and awe would do more than slaughter. As they closed, a ballista bolt cracked the air, barely missing Viserion's trailing wing. Jon whipped around to see a scorpion hastily erected on the Tower of the Hand. Another bolt loaded, the crank spun by sweating soldiers. Jon hissed a curse, leaned forward wordlessly. Viserion folded wings, dropped like a stone, then unfurled at the last instant, talons tearing freestone blocks as the dragon skimmed the tower, jaws snapping down upon bronze and oak. Wood splintered, men screamed, metal shrieked. A heartbeat later, the weapon peeled from its mount and plunged into the courtyard below. They rose again, smoke stinging Jon's eyes. He scanned rooftops for more scorpions, saw only panicked men dragging crates, toppling barrels, retreating under awnings. Good. Let fear unmake their resolve. With a thunder of wings, Viserion perched upon the marble balustrade outside the throne room. Jon leapt from saddle to scorched stone, pulling the battered Stark sigil cloak tight against the furnace wind. Guards rushed forward, spears shaking. Jon drew Longclaw, Valyrian steel shimmering with the reflected hellfire, still dancing across the courtyard. "Lay down arms," he shouted, voice echoing through vaulted corridors. "By order of King Jon of the houses Stark and Targaryen, rightful protector of the realm." The words tasted foreign even to his own tongue. Yet in this moment, blade in hand, dragon at his back, he felt their truth buckle something in his chest. A door opening onto a future he had never sought but could no longer refuse. One gold cloak broke first, spear clattering to marble. Others followed, a chain of submission rippling through the hall. Jon strode past them toward the throne room's carved oak doors. Ajar now, voices within raised in frantic debate. He kicked them wide. Cersei Lannister stood beneath vaulted ribs of redstone, crown askew upon her golden head, eyes black with fury. Jaime stood beside her, sword half drawn. The mountain loomed like a cliff behind them, purple armor glinting. Jon advanced 3 paces, Longclaw leveled. "Yield the city," he said, each word a hammer blow across the hush. "Spare your people and yourself. No fire need touch another roof." Cersei's laugh was brittle as cracked glass. "A wolf on a dragon." She sneered. "The realm has found new jesters." Jaime's brow knitted, gaze shifting to Jon's sword, then past him to the balcony where Viserion crouched, wings mantled, tail lashing marble to dust. He saw doom there, and something else, perhaps release. His gloved hand eased from his hilt. Cersei's eyes narrowed. "Traitor," she hissed. But her brother was already sinking to one knee. The mountain shifted, confused. Jon raised Longclaw in a silent threat. The great helm turned, weighing him, weighing the dragon. Even that abomination could calculate odds. After a breathless span, the massive knight lowered his sword's tip to the floor. In that hush, Cersei's rage curdled into desperation. "You think you've won?" she rasped. But I have wildfire caches left, Wolf. I will burn this city to ash before I surrender it to you." Jon's heart clenched. He thought of the crowded streets below, mothers clutching babes, fishermen selling eels for copper. He took a step forward, too late. Cersei lifted a hand and snapped her fingers. A dull boom tremored beneath the red floor tiles. Dust sprayed from archways. Far below, deep in the city's bones, a pulse of emerald radiance flickered. Jon's blood iced. Viserion shrieked, sensing fire of a kind older even than dragonflame. Jon spun, sprinted to the balcony as a second boom thundered, louder, closer. Across the city, he saw green fire blossom through a granary roof, spew into the dawn sky, its billow like a diseased mushroom. Panic roiled through every cell of his body. If the wildfire chain ignited fully, King's Landing would become a pyre brighter than the sun, and his own dragonfire would feed it. He vaulted onto Viserion's neck, shouting words lost to the wind. The dragon leapt. Marble cracked apart. They soared. Below, wildfire erupted in two more places, one alarmingly close to the Great Sepp's ruins, another along the riverfront. But the pattern was clear. Cersei's pyromancers had not finished their digging. The caches were scattered, poorly linked. If they could contain the spread. Jon banked toward the smoking granary. Viserion's throat pulsed. "No," Jon barked, yanking hard on the reins. The beast growled but cut his fire, wings beating hard to blast fresh air across the sulphurous plume. Flames twisted, guttered, starved. He angled for the riverside inferno next, descending low enough that Viserion's wings blew toppled barrels into the rush. Green flames hissed on the water, but water smothered wildfire only where the currents were swift. Jon guided Viserion's claws to shred a grain warehouse roof, collapsing timbers into the blaze, cutting off air. The roar dimmed, sullen. They rose, circled. The third plume already dwindled. Perhaps the charge had been small, damp, never meant to ignite. Jon exhaled a shuddering breath. He guided Viserion back to the Red Keep. The balcony lay shattered, but within the hall, Jaime Lannister stood over his sister, sword discarded. Tears streaked his face. Cersei knelt upon the marble, wrists bound by the same leather Jaime had once used to secure his cloak. The mountain lay motionless against a collapsed pillar, helm dented. Some inner feud Jon would learn of later, perhaps. Jaime looked up at Jon's approach, eyes haunted. She would have killed them all. "I know," Jon said gently. He sheathed Longclaw and reached to take the leather bindings. "It's done." Outside, bells began to toll. First hesitant, as if no bell ringer wished to claim the moment. Then with gathering conviction, until all 77, kept by the faith, beat in unison, across the city. "Surrender, surrender, surrender." Jon Snow closed his eyes, letting the echoes wash over him. He felt older than the ancient stones beneath his boots, older than the ghost of Aegon Targaryen whispering through Dragonstone's halls. Yet the war for life against death waited still beyond frozen rivers. He had claimed a throne only to bind himself to a still bloodier duty. But for one breath, amid a dawn bright with bells instead of screams, he allowed himself a sliver of hope that power might yet serve peace. Behind him Viserion roared triumph, wings unfurling against the sunrise as if to grasp it whole. The light spilled over scales pale as winter wheat, and for one heartbeat, the dragon seemed less a creature of fear than a promise. Fire to warm the living, not scorch them. Jon reached back, resting his fingers on the hot scales. "Easy, old friend," he whispered. "The real fight lies north." The bells pealed on, bright and relentless, as King's Landing knelt before a king who had never wanted crowns, and the shadow of a pale dragon stretched over rooftops like the wing of destiny itself. Blackwater Bay lay mute beneath the hush of late morning, its waters slick as hammered bronze save for the small ripples where half-sunken ships still rocked from Viserion's wake. The bells had ceased only an hour prior, leaving a rare crystalline quiet. The sort of hush a city hears perhaps twice in a lifetime. The instant after a siege has ended, and just before the reckoning begins. Smoke rose in thin gray spires from the 3 smothered wildfire fires, climbing into a flawless sky that smelled of salt and ash and something sweeter. The first stirrings of relief among thousands who had lived the past hours, certain the stranger's pale horses galloped their way. Jon Snow felt none of that relief. He stood in the shadow of the Iron Throne, blade-notched boots planted on the red marble floor, pooled with the day's first sunlight. Fatigue tugged at his shoulders. He had not slept in 2 nights, and the hours of battle, dragonback or otherwise, had scoured the marrow from his bones. Yet every nerve remained alert. Exhaustion could wait. Across the hall, Davos Seaworth's soft voice carried, as he dismissed the last of the surrendering officers. A stammering Stormlander knight, and several gold-cloaked captains, who had renounced Queen Cersei with the haste of men tossing aside hot iron. They limped away under guard, boots echoing down corridors where Lannister crimson banners still hung. That would change soon enough. Tyrion had already dispatched runners to drag the old Baratheon-era banners from storage. A pragmatic compromise while new sigils were stitched. Jon glanced at Cersei Lannister where she sat in a high-backed oak chair, wrists now bound with simple rope rather than Jaime's makeshift leather. They had taken her crown and left her hair in disarray, but they had not stripped her dignity. She wore it like a mask, blue eyes cold as winter hoarfrost. Jaime hovered nearby, a prisoner in everything but irons, gaze fixed on the floor. The Kingslayer's guilt made him seem smaller, thinner, though half the realm had once named him lion among men. Tyrion finished scribbling on a brittle parchment, orders to the harbor masters, or perhaps a tally of the city's grain. He signed with a flourish, blew on the ink to dry, then ambled toward Jon. "Your Grace," he said in that sardonic lilt, as though the title were a wine just uncorked, aroma still uncertain. "An audience awaits outside the throne room. Half the guildmasters, 3 of the Faith's senior septons, and more harbor officers than I ever knew existed. They wish to know what you intend this day, and the next, and the next. Many wish simply to stare at you in hopes you'll sprout a second head to match the dragon." "Men?" Jon gave a weary nod. "They will have answers once I do. For now I want the city secure, the fires truly dead, and the gates open to our wounded. Use the gold cloaks. Use whomever you trust." "Trust is a rare metal in King's Landing," Tyrion mused. "But I have a few rusty bits tucked away. I'll see to it." "Nenshator." Jon's eyes drifted to Jaime. "Where do you wish your brother held?" "Under watch," Tyrion replied without pause, though sorrow shaded his voice. "Yet treat him fairly." Cersei's laughter cracked the air. "Fairly? You'll pardon the jest. Your northern wolf sits a throne stolen with wildfire hanging over us still, and speaks of fairness. That wildfire nearly incinerated your own city," Davos said, approaching with Sansa's raven-sealed letter in hand. "We smelled the pyromancer's pits. The fact King's Landing stands yet is no thanks to you." "Men?" Cersei's glare could have scorched parchment. "When dragons rule, cities burn. Ask old Valyria." Jon stepped closer, boots grinding cinders. "I have burned nothing you did not place in peril yourself. You will stand trial, but not this day. For now you will be housed in the Tower of the Hand under guard. No dungeons." She wet her lips, poised perhaps to spit defiance. But Jaime touched her sleeve with trembling fingers. Some silent exchange passed. Regret, recognition, an end. And her shoulders sagged. Wordless, she allowed 2 Stark soldiers to escort her away, crimson gown whisking ash from the floor. Jaime followed, bound more by sorrow than by guards. When they were gone, Tyrion exhaled long and low. "There will be songs about that exchange," he murmured, half dazed. "And only half will mock me." Jon managed a faint smile before turning to Davos. "The Raven?" Davos handed over Sansa's message and stepped aside. Jon cracked the wax. His sister's writing, precise as frost filigree, filled the parchment. "Brother, news reached us by Raven from Crackclaw Point. Dragon banners over King's Landing, but a wolf at their center. All of the north waits on your next breath. Mother would have warned you that crowns cut deeper than swords. Remember your people, and remember winter." We send grain and healers south on the King's Road at dawn. We have word Daenerys Targaryen still sails. Meet her beneath peace, if it can be had. If not, the North stands ready but weary of war. Sansa, Lady of Winterfell. Jon folded the letter carefully. Sansa's concern seeped through each line. She feared a queen's rage bursting like a seed pod upon them all. So did he. Yet some part of him longed to see Daenerys again. To look in her eyes and find understanding. To tell her that none of this had been betrayal, only necessity. He doubted she would believe. A pang of loss sliced him. The memory of her gaze softening as they studied ancient dragon pit ruins, of her hand resting in his atop a frosted cliff at Eastwatch. The bond forged in shared fire might snap under the weight of thrones. He turned to Davos. How many hours until high tide? 5, maybe 6. Good winds. The Queen's fleet could sight the bay before sunset. Then she and I will speak before the sun sets. Tyrion, you'll handle the city in my absence. Davos, raise the Stark banner atop the Gate of the Gods. If Daenerys sees both dragon and wolf together, perhaps she'll listen before Drogon's fire does the talking. Davos nodded grimly. And if she does not? Jon stared beyond the hall's shattered windows to where Viserion perched on the ruined parapet of Maegor's Holdfast, like a marble gargoyle come alive. Then the gods help us all. Near midday, the plaza before the great sept skeleton filled with small folk. Fishmongers bearing nets crusted with salt, cobblers smelling of pitch, silent mothers clutching children by the shoulders. They gathered in wary knots, watching the procession of northern soldiers, who trudged up the hill with barrels of river water and loaves from seized Lannister granaries. The smell of fresh bread drifted over charred stone and drew others until a thin line snaked from plaza to gates. The soldiers handed loaves and ladles, without coins demanded. A hush of wonder rippled among the people. In King's Landing, charity had become an alien spectacle. Inside the shattered sept, Tyrion climbed onto a granite block toppled from the dome's collapse years earlier. He addressed guildmasters and septons with the clipped confidence of a man who knew half the city might rip him limb from limb if he misspoke. Yet he offered simple things. Food, leniency, wages for those who labored to rebuild. And he invoked names still holy here. Father, Mother, Smith. Practical promises gilded with piety. By the time he concluded, the guildmasters were already scribbling new orders to reopen the docks by dusk, and the septons murmured about cleansing rites to purify a city spared annihilation. Not all cooperated. In a cellar beneath the Street of Flower, a knot of loyalist gold cloaks cornered 2 Stark outriders and dragged them into shadow. Swords flashed. One northerner died gasping against sacks of grain. The other crawled free, coated in blood, to sound the alarm. Within an hour, 100 gold cloaks, loyal to Cersei, barricaded themselves in the Dragon Gate barracks. Arrows knocked, banners displayed. Tyrion weighed options. Storming risked civilian lives. Starving would incite panic. When word reached Jon, then already saddling Viserion for the short flight across the bay, he dispatched Arius, old tutor Syrio Forel, now captain of a squad of fierce Bravosi Sellswords pledged to Davos, to slip through a cistern and open the rear postern. At dusk the Sellswords emerged, dragging the mutinous captain by his golden cloak, and no more blood spilled. Yet beneath every triumph pulsed an anxious drumbeat. Daenerys. Her fleet's sails had been spotted near Skull's Isle by a fisher who rode frantic to the city with news. As sun dipped west, Jon stood atop the highest turret of the Red Keep, cloak snapping in a sea breeze. His eyes swept the horizon till at last he saw them. A scattered armada dotting the glittering plain of water, and high above, the black-winged silhouette of Drogon circling like war-given form. A lump lodged in his throat. He descended to the courtyard where Viserion waited, golden scales burnished by sunset. Davos strapped the aged harness tight. "I still say this is madness," the old knight muttered. "She may open with fire before words. If she sees Viserion without me, she'll think him stolen," Jon answered. "If she sees me upon him..." "That may mean something. Or everything," Davos conceded. He tightened the last buckle, then caught Jon's arm. "For what it's worth, lad. Your father would be proud." Jon's smile was thin. "He'd tell me to keep my head. I intend to." He vaulted into the saddle, leather creaking, knees gripping warm scales. The dragon's shoulder muscles rolled like living glaciers beneath him. He leaned forward, whispering, "Fly gentle." Viserion rumbled assent and leapt skyward, stirring vortices of dust that whirled across the yard. They climbed above rooftops where the wolf dragon banners cracked in fresh wind. 1,000 faces tilted upward, some fearful, others awed. Jon prayed not to disappoint any, though he knew he would disappoint many. Across Blackwater Bay, Drogon's vast shape banked on an updraft, black scales rimmed with firelight. Even from leagues away, the elder dragon's roar vibrated Jon's ribcage. Viserion trumpeted in answer. No challenge, more greeting, and angled toward him. As they closed the distance, Jon glimpsed the flagship. Decks lined with unsullied, their spears a forest of silver points, and at the prow Daenerys herself, silver gold hair whipping like a banner. He saw her raise a hand toward Drogon, perhaps to steady him, perhaps to command. Her posture radiated storms. Viserion slowed, wings beating broad, circular strokes that let them hover just outside scorpion range. Jon eased from the saddle onto the gold-crested ridge between Viserion's neck spikes, balancing on the dragon's broad spine as though atop a living hill. He lifted empty hands. No sword, no spear. Only truth, and the hope it would be heard. Daenerys stared up at him, eyes twin shards of polished amethyst, burning with disbelief. She shouted something lost to wind. Drogon's wings stalled. He hovered opposite Viserion, close enough that the downdrafts battered Jon like fists of warm air. Frost and flame eye to eye. In that suspended moment, Jon felt Viserion's heart hammer beneath his boots. Not fear, but recognition. Drogon thrust his head forward, nostrils flaring. Viserion answered with a deep croon. The two dragons' necks arched, jaws parted, scenting each other like wolves meeting after long absence. No fire, no slash of talons, only a low rumble of regard. Jon risked a single step forward along Viserion's neck, closer to Daenerys. "My queen," he called, voice ragged. "Hear me." She did not lower her gaze. "You sit upon my dragon." She cried back, words carrying across the gulf. "You break fealty and steal my birthright." "I have stolen nothing," he answered. "Viserion chose me, because the realm needed speed no council could grant. King's Landing is yours still, if you'll rule it in peace. Cersei is taken. Her wildfire is doused. No innocents burned today." Her face shifted. Pain, anger, heartbreak churned like clouds in a gale. "I felt the flames rise," she said. "I saw the smoke from leagues away and feared the worst. And I feared you would arrive to find ashes." His voice broke on that word. "But you arrived to find hope. The Iron Throne stands unblooded. Bend no knee to me. Only stand beside, so the world might stand against the night together." Bah. Silence reigned but for dragons' wings and gull cries. Unsullied shield captains watched, muscles coiled. One arrow, one bolt, could tip the balance into chaos. Drogon emitted a low chuff, as if urging his rider. Daenerys closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were wet. "You usurped command without consent," she said, tone softer but edged. "Yet you spared the city. You spared me a stain I fear I might have worn. I know the taste of vengeance too well." She inhaled. "I will hear you, on Dragonstone. Send no fleet. Come alone if you trust me." Jon dipped his head. "Viserion and I will come. Tonight." He let the wind carry his words, hoping they sounded as promise, not challenge. Then he guided Viserion into a slow banking turn, presenting no threat as he peeled away. Drogon hovered, watching until Viserion's shadow no longer overlapped his own, then wheeled back toward the flagship. Twilight cloaked Dragonstone in lilac haze when Jon dismounted in the courtyard. Missandei guided him through echoing halls lit by oil lamps where shadows leapt like wraiths. At the doors to the map room she paused. "She waits," she whispered, compassion flickering in her dark eyes. "Be gentle, be gentle." Jon nodded. The doors creaked open. Daenerys stood alone beside the carved table of Westeros, palms braced on either side of the narrow sea. Firelight painted her in shades of copper and gold, transforming sorrow to steel. She did not speak at first. Jon advanced 3 paces, halting before the riverlands. Memories flooded him, whispered counsels on this very stone. First flights beyond, whispered promises in candlelit corridors. He drew a breath. "I should hate you," she said softly. "Every song of conquerors ends with betrayal. I see my father's end each time I close my eyes. When I saw your banners over King's Landing, I feared all prophecy fulfilled." "I feared the same," Jon admitted. "But I did not fly to King's Landing to take your throne. I flew to prevent its destruction, by Cersei's wildfire or by what you might unleash in anger." Her eyebrows knit. "You think me a butcher. I think you've lost too much to gamble more. You spared King's Landing once. I sought to spare you the temptation not to spare it again." Silence. Flames crackled. She stared at the obsidian walls, at the wax-scarred candelabra, anywhere but him. "You stole my dragon. He chose his rider. He chose you because you share blood." Her gaze snapped back. "You are Aegon Targaryen by Rhaegar's line. Yet you told me you wanted no crown. Now I see a kingdom ready to kneel." Jon's chest tightened. "I still want no crown. I would abdicate tonight if it meant peace. Let the throne stand empty until the war in the north is won. Seat whomever proves worthy after. But I could not wait while Cersei plotted. And I could not risk you dying in a siege thousands of miles from the true enemy." "Then so." Daenerys moved around the table, each footfall echoing. She stopped before the sculpted wall, fingertips grazing the carved ice. "You fought for the living while others scrabbled for chairs." Her voice trembled. "Yet the North will call you king. They will not kneel to me if they see you crowned already." "Then I will not be crowned," Jon said simply. "I will serve, not rule. Share command with me. Together we march north." Her laugh was soft, incredulous. 2 dragons above 1 banner. She shook her head. "The lords of Westeros will bristle. Let them bristle at victory, not defeat. Tonight the people of King's Landing eat bread, not ash. Tomorrow we sail to White Harbor and ride for Winterfell. The Night King marches even now." She studied him a long moment, gave a slow nod. "One condition. Cersei lives to stand trial by my law. If the realm must see justice done, it should see a Targaryen gavel fall fairly." Jon hesitated, only a heartbeat. "Agreed. So long as the trial is fair, with northern judges among yours." "Done." She extended a hand, palm up. The gesture carried not only truce, but trust renewed at cost beyond measure. Jon placed his hand in hers. Heat flared where skin met. 2 living torches in a frozen world. For an instant, he felt the shape of destiny shift. The north snow and the south summer melding, forging a blade bright enough to cleave night itself. Daenerys exhaled, tension flowing from her shoulders. "You will have command of my unsullied host on land. I will keep the Dothraki with me as outriders. Drogon and Viserion shall fly together." Fear flickered in her eyes. "They have not flown so since Rhaegal fell." Jon finished gently. "I know." She squeezed his hand once, then released. "We depart at dawn. Rest while you can." He bowed his head, turned to leave, paused. "When you saw the smoke," he asked quietly, "what did you fear more? That I'd taken your throne, or that I'd perished in the taking?" Tears shone, unfallen. "Both," she whispered. Jon swallowed hard, nodded, and quit the chamber. Outside, the night smelled of driftwood and embers, and the sea's endless, forgiving breath. Above, 2 dragons wheeled around the stone spires of an ancient citadel, their cries haunting, exultant, new. Morning unfurled beneath banners, both direwolf gray and 3-headed crimson Dadal. The combined fleet weighed anchor, hulls carving the bay like knives through silk. Jon rode Viserion in wide arcs overhead, scanning for reefs, while Drogon glided farther east, shepherding the trailing transports. The sight, two dragons bracketed by sails bearing wolf and dragon, stunned every watchtower from Driftmark to Storm's End. Ravens beat frenzied paths inland, scattering tidings faster than wind. 3 days' sail carried them up the coast to White Harbor. Along the way, Jon and Daenerys met each dusk on Drogon's broad back, or in Jon's modest cabin amid swaying lanterns, mapping supply lines, splitting the host. Unsullied in phalanx, Northmen ahead as scouts, Dothraki outriders screening flanks. Gendry, freshly raised Lord of Storms, and by Jon's decree and Daenerys' assent, led a vanguard of Baratheon heavy infantry, sworn to the northern cause. Tyrion served as quartermaster, his quill scratching ceaselessly, while Davos consulted with Manderly captains to ferry grain up the White Knife. Each small triumph built fragile camaraderie. Mistrust lingered, yet necessity bound them tight as ship's rope. At White Harbor, the city cheered a greeting, neither kingly nor queenly, but awed. Townsfolk lined the quays as two dragons settled on the sandbar. Sansa awaited on the ramparts, hair catching sunlight like living copper. She greeted Daenerys with a curtsy measured and cool. Words exchanged there, private, tense, then oddly calm, would ripple for years in song. But that night feasting fires burned on the Wolf's Head banners and the dragon alike. And for the first time in centuries, Manderly minstrels sang verses, blending ice and flame, without lament. Winter, however, ignored songs. On the third morning, winter's breath swept in brutal from the shivering sea, icing rigging, cladding helms in rime. Jon led the march inland, unsullied ranks crunching fresh snow, deer wolves baying beyond tree line. Scouts delivered grim tidings. Undead outriders sighted south of Last Hearth, columns of whites churning the snows like black ants across parchment. The Night King had divided his host. One arm marching on the King's Road toward Winterfell, another veering west, perhaps to seize the fertile riverlands before spring. The living would need to split as well or be flanked and devoured. Around dusk, a council formed in the great hall of House Umber, now abandoned, but for Jon's war table. Fires roared in twin braziers. Steam rose from armor as snow melt dripped in rivulets. Daenerys circled the table, eyes tracking carved tokens representing enemy forces. "We cannot defend Winterfell and the Riverlands both," she said. "If we scatter our strength, we invite defeat in detail. One hammer, one anvil." Davos offered gruffly. "Let Winterfell stand as anvil. Drag the dead against her walls while a mounted host hits from behind. That risks Winterfell breaking," Sansa countered. "The last harvest is near gone. We cannot feed tens of thousands behind her walls." Tyrion tapped the token of Moat Cailin. "Block the causeway. Force the dead to slog through a gauntlet. Dragons can scour the marshes." "Ben?" Jon met Daenerys' gaze. "Drogon and Viserion can burn swaths, but whites cannot drown. Fire kills, but there are so many. We may tire before they burn." Silence fell, heavy as snowpack. At last, Daenerys spoke. "Then Drogon and I will strike the Night King directly. Viserion can shield Winterfell. The rest of you focus on thinning ranks." Tormund Giantsbane, released from Eastwatch to join the host, bellowed an approving laugh. Burn the corpse who rides hardest." Jon's stomach tightened. The Night King's spear had felled Rhaegal in one breath. He looked to Daenerys. "You will not face him alone." She smiled, fierce. "I will not be alone. I will have Drogon." "And I will have you," he answered. A hush, then nods. Plans rippled outward. Unsullied to the causeway, Northmen to Winterfell's outer trench, Dothraki under Jorah Mormont. Newly healed, from the Shadow Tower flank, Gendry's Baratheons would garrison Moat Cailin's ruins to hold retreat. Each lord signed his name or mark upon the parchment. The council adjourned, tension taut, but laced with steel resolve. Outside, snow whirled thick. muffling even dragon roars into low moans. Jon stood upon the parapet of the ruined tower where once the Umbers had watched for Karstark raiders. Now he watched for something far worse. Daenerys joined him, cloak drawn tight. Cheeks flushed rose from cold bite. For a moment, they simply breathed together, fog curling. "You asked once if I thought you butcher," Jon said quietly. "I have seen butchery. It does not wear grief as you do." She did not answer, but her gloved fingers brushed his. They stood thus, silent, while the night wind howled through arrow slits. The next dawn they rode, dragons overhead, banners snapping, hooves pounding frozen earth. Snow-stung faces, bit fingers numb. None complained. Every man, woman, and child, marching knew the shape of fate now. A blue-eyed demon, astride skeletal steed. Death in his shadow. Stories whispered since the long night now marched south wearing rotted flesh armor. And the living, led by fire and ice entwined, would answer. The host reached Winterfell under a sky like hammered lead. Its walls rose stark and scarred from prior sieges, trenches freshly dug, towers brimming with archers in furs. Sansa greeted them at the gate, Arya beside her, gray cloak dusted white. Arya's eyes, sharp as new forged blades, flicked to Daenerys, to Jon, to the dragons overhead. She nodded once, approval, perhaps, or mere acknowledgement of tools at hand, and vanished into the courtyard shadows. Inside the great hall warmth clung, but the air shivered with questions. Could dragons burn an endless tide? Could Northmen hold trenches muddied to ice? Could ancient grudges truly fade beneath common peril? Jon moved among his people, speaking quiet words, steadying hands, remembering names forgotten by kings. Everywhere he felt the weight of expectation heavier than any crown. A crown might be set down, but hope could not. That night he slept in his childhood chamber, ghosts pressing against the shutters. Bran's laughter, Robb's footfalls, father's stern praise. Sleep came fitful, dreams filled with green fire and blue fire, wings of black and gold. He woke before dawn to horns keening along the distant ridge. The vanguard scouts returned, faces blood-flecked, horses lathered. "They come," one gasped. Columns as wide as the King's Road. Giants among them, dead giants. Then? Jon's heart thudded like a war drum. He donned furs, clasped wolf cloak, belted longclaw. Outside in the Bailey dragons crouched, breath pluming clouds of steam that crystallized mid-air. He reached out, touched Viserion's muzzle. The dragon's golden eyes fixed on him, an ember promise. Across the yard Daenerys mounted Drogon, silver hair glowing. Their eyes met across distance and din, a glance taut as drawn bow. Nothing spoke, nothing needed. Two hearts, two fires, one purpose. The clang of gate chains, the creak of hinges opening to a dawn washed bone white. Beyond the walls, snow churned in swirling maelstrom, and within it shapes moved. Endless, relentless, hunger wearing human form. The dead had come. Jon lifted Longclaw high, blade catching first light, sending a spark that seemed to hover between earth and sky. A roar rose, from Northmen, from Unsullied, from Dothraki beating Arak against shield. Above, Drogon and Viserion unfurled wings, screaming challenge that thundered across wintry moor. And under that roar, quiet as prayer, Jon whispered one promise to the dead and the living alike. "We will not break." The battle that followed would one day fill volumes, entire libraries bound in frost-flaked vellum. Bards would sing of unsullied shields clashing in disciplined lines, of Dothraki braids snapping like whips as curved blades hacked rotted sinew, of Baratheon rams smashing frozen ribs to shards. They would wail laments for Ser Jorah's final charge under whirling snow, for Tormund's laughter turning to roar as he wrestled an undead giant into a burning trench. They would speak solemnly of Sansa atop Winterfell's battlements, overseeing grain stores feeding wounded, of Arya darting through blizzards, blade flashing silver death, ghost in gray. And always they would return to the sky, to dragons dancing a lethal ballet above. Flame scorching white plains emerald with fire melted into glass. Jon rode Viserion in sweeping strafes along the causeway, torching ranks until slush hissed from heat. But whites rose from ashes, blackened yet mindless, as though fire merely peeled back pretense. He realized true victory lay not in numbers slain, but in the single figure who commanded them. Far to the east, beyond the rotting orchard where willows once bloomed, Jon glimpsed him. The Night King, mounted upon his pale antlered steed, eyes burning cerulean. Around him slouched pale white walkers, blades of rime-forged ice. Every instinct screamed that there, within that frigid heart, the war's key beat. Jon banked Viserion, angling. Quarrels whistled past from Winterfell's towers. They'd spotted the Night King too, but lacked range. He urged speed. Viserion screamed, muscles bunching. From the south Drogon streaked overhead, Daenerys leaning low over black neck. Their eyes met mid-flight. A nod. Two hunters, sighting same prey. They converged, flanking like raptors. The Night King watched, serene as sculpture, raising one hand. Ice shards erupted from the air, not arrows but spears conjured of pure frozen air, whistling like banshees. Drogon rolled, flames belching. Shards melted mid-flight. Viserion bucked sideward. One spear grazed his flank, scoring scales white. The dragon howled, wings faltering. Jon gripped tight, heart in throat, but Viserion righted, pupils narrowing to slits. Below, the Night King drew a long spear wreathed in uncanny frost, the twin of that which slew Viserion once before. He spun it, poised. Jon leaned forward, whispering a wordless plea. Viserion tucked wings, dove straight toward that icy crown, jaws glowing deep orange. The Night King hurled. Time slowed. Spear singing, air shimmering. Drogon plunged from above, intercepting in blur of black wings. The spear struck Drogon's left shoulder. Shattered but broke no scale. Shards burst into snow crystals spiraling down. The Night King's calm cracked. Eyebrows lifted. Viserion unleashed a torrent of gold-white fire. It engulfed the Night King, his steed, his guard. The frost demon vanished in a column of incandescent fury that lit snow like stained glass windows. Jon buried face in cloak against heat. When flame died, ash drifted. An eerie hush. The steed lay collapsed, limbs charcoal. Walkers crumbled like shattered statues. And in their midst, the Night King knelt. One knee to scorched earth. Cloak aflame. He rose slowly, fire guttering but eyes blazing bluer than ever. Charred flesh peeled yet held. Jon's breath caught. Dragon flame alone would not suffice. He drew Longclaw, felt the Valyrian steel hum. Perhaps only that magic could sever Winter's heart. But he was dragged back, too high. And ground swarmed with undead still. A flash of silver darted beneath, a streak weaving through whites with impossible grace. Arya ducked. She sprinted toward the Night King, cat-like, leapfrogging corpses, Valyrian dagger gleaming. Jon's shout lost to wind. The Night King turned, raised frost blade. Then the air split with a thunderclap as Drogon slammed down between them. Ground shattering. Snow geysered. Arya tumbled back. The Night King staggered. Jon seized opportunity. He urged Viserion into vertical stoop, leapt from saddle mid-plunge, landed in snow rolled to cushion. Pain shot through knees, but he rose, long claw flashing. The Night King straightened, face inscrutable, drew ice blade fresh as moonlight. Steam rose off his half-melted armor. They circled amid vortex of silent snow and swirling ember, two poles of the world. Longclaw met ice with ringing crack. Shock numbed Jon's arm. He stepped back, slashed again. Sparks flew black and blue. The Night King parried with inhuman speed, riposted. Jon ducked, felt cold kiss of near-death graze hair. Above, Drogon roared. Drogon's flame sweeping to hold back whites pressing perimeter. Viserion circled wounded but furious, raining fire lanes. Arya weaved between, carving joints from lesser walkers. Her face a mask of cold focus. Jon and the Night King clashed again. Ice blade sliced fur cloak, skinned shoulder. Blood steamed. Jon feinted, cut wide. Ice blocked. He glimpsed cracks spidering along the Night King's pauldron from prior fire. Weakness. He lunged, blade driving for fissure. The Night King sidestepped, seized Jon's throat with glacial hand. Agony blazed, skin burned in reverse, heat sucked away. Vision blurred. Arya's battle cry pierced haze as she flung herself onto the Night King's back, dagger plunging between frozen plates. Blue light flashed, then dimmed. Dagger sheared away, ice armor depriving purchase. With casual roll, the Night King hurled her aside. She tumbled, dagger skittering over crust to vanish beneath snow. Yet, grip loosened fraction. Jon pulled free, gasping. He pivoted, hacking at the same fissure. Metal bit, lodged. The Night King's expression twitched. Annoyance. He kneed Jon in ribs. Bones cracked. Jon collapsed to one knee, vision graying. Ice blade raised overhead for killing stroke. Flame roared. Not dragons but living fire. Tyrion? No. Torch borne by Davos, who sprinted through ring of corpses, flaming pitch in hand. He hurled it. Fire splashed Night King's shoulder. Blue flames battling orange. Ice pauldron shattered in cascade of shards. Jon drove Longclaw upward with last strength. The blade pierced exposed chest, sank to crossguard. The Night King stiffened. Blue eyes widened, cracks of light rippling from wound. Silence, then a resonant chime like crystal snapping. The Night King imploded, body fracturing to glittering fragments that whirled upward in column of frost. A shockwave erupted, sweeping outward in silent concussion. Whites collapsed where they stood, strings cut. Snow fell still. The dead were dead again. Jon sank, heartbeat pounding, ears ringing. His breath fogged in still air, each exhale proof of life. Davos knelt beside, steadied him. Arya retrieved her dagger, eyes on the vanishing frost column. Drogon's wingbeat slowed overhead. Viserion landed, curling protective tail. Across the plain, living soldiers lowered weapons, confusion blooming to ragged cheers. The long night was broken. Dawn, peach pink and shy, crept above the horizon as if afraid to hope, then spread rosy fingers over white fields strewn with silent corpses that at last would rise no more. 3 days later, the fires still burned, towering pyres outside Wintertown where names were sung and tears froze upon cheeks. Northmen and Unsullied mourned beside one another. Dothraki keened at the edges, strange echoes across snow. Gendry wept for Stormlander brothers. Sansa carried bowls of hot broth to limping archers. Tyrion found Davos and clasped his shoulder where Torchburn blistered. All grief intermingled, ashes one. Within Winterfell's godswood, Jon knelt before the heart tree, snow melting on red leaves. Daenerys stood beside him, cloak heavy with frost. Silence reigned until she whispered, "When the Night King shattered, I felt a weight lift from my lungs, and yet I feel no lighter." "Nah." "Nor I," Jon said. "Peace is harder than war. The dead ask nothing once burned. The living will ask everything." She nodded, gaze on Weirwood's bleeding bark. "What now, Jon Snow? The realm will want a king and a queen, but two cannot sit one throne." He rose, faced her. "Let the realm choose. Great council, representatives from every land. If they choose you, I will serve as sword and shield. If they choose me, they will choose you," she said. Song and story already spread. The bastard wolf who rode the dragon's heir, slew the Night King, spared King's Landing. They will kneel, as will I, yet songs say nothing of the heart. Jon's breath caught. Songs might yet sing of two who ruled not from Iron Throne, but from promise kept. A faint smile. "Then let promise guide us. A council it shall be. And if crowns weigh too heavy, perhaps we melt them into plowshares." He laughed, surprising himself. My council will object. But a king can dream. Their hands found each other, fingers chilled yet warm within. Wind sighed through Hearttree, leaves rustling like pages turned on an old tale seeking new chapter. Somewhere beyond, drums of feasting began, first notes of celebration halting, unsure, then rising. Life returning. Jon's wolf, ghost, white as snowfall, padded into clearing, muzzle nudging Jon's palm. Jon scratched behind an ear, heart easing. Daenerys reached to stroke the direwolf's neck. Ghost accepted with canine dignity, symbols of Northern dragon at peace beneath Weirwood's timeless witness. In that hush, Jon imagined future winters where children sledded these hills unafraid, where ships bearing dragonwolf flags carried grain. Not soldiers, where the only fires blazing over King's Landing were festival lanterns. He knew storms would come, ambition, revenge, greed. But he had seen dawn follow endless night. He would see dawn again. He drew Daenerys beneath the Hearttree's crimson canopy. Snowflakes drifted, catching in her hair like stars. No throne forged of swords can bind us, he murmured. Only what we choose. She pressed her brow to his. Then let us choose dawn. Above them, red leaves shivered, letting fall a scatter of crimson on snow. Blood-hued petals upon fresh white, sign and seal of beginnings. Far off, two dragons curled in restful slumber. Wings entwined, warming each other against winter's fading breath. And high overhead the sun cleared ragged clouds, its light glancing off ice-crusted ramparts, to shower the world in splinters of gold. The long night was over. The great tale moved on, toward day. An ocean of stars spilled across the vault of heaven above Winterfell, brilliant and cold. When Jon Snow finally left the Godswood, the night air carried a faint scent of pine smoke and melting snow. Somewhere in the distance a direwolf howled, a triumphant, forlorn note that mingled with distant bursts of drunken laughter from the great hall. The dead were burned, the living were drunk, and the world itself hovered on the raw edge between yesterday's horror and tomorrow's promise. Jon felt it in his very bones. The ache of wounds, the tug of future, the pull of ghosts. As he crossed the yard, he noticed that the courtyard fires had burned low. Torches guttered and hissed under weak gusts, leaving shadows pooled like ink around the training dummies. Moonlight silvered the broken ramparts and lent the fresh-cut logs of the funeral pyres a glassy sheen. One last flame smoldered in a half-collapsed barrel, and a lone figure knelt before it. Shoulders bent, Arya Dot. The glow kissed her cheekbones, carved them knife-sharp. Thou winged a knife-sharp. In her hand she turned her Valyrian dagger over and over, the metal still bearing faint scuffs from where it had skittered through the snow earlier in the day. You should rest, Jon said softly. She glanced up, and dream of ice blades and giants. She flipped the dagger one last time, then slid it away. I will rest when Cersei faces judgment. Until then, the war isn't done. Jon's lips twitched, weary amusement, pride, worry. Cersei sits in chains. The Unsullied keep watch. Chains snap, Arya replied. And lions bite even when caged. He watched her a moment, then crouched opposite, elbows on knees. You saved me, Arya. Saved all of us. Her eyes dipped to his shoulder where bandages poke from beneath fur. You still bleed. So do you. She rolled one scarred shoulder. The seam of her jerkin was dark where blood had seeped, but she shrugged as if it belonged to another life. Sharp scratches. Nothing more. They fell into quiet, the kind siblings share when words can only bruise. Finally, Jon said, when this council meets, whenever the lords gather to decide who wears the crown, I would have you there. You and Sansa both. I'm no lady. She answered then. But I'll stand at your side, or a Daenerys. If it comes to that. Jon inhaled the smoky air. And if it comes to neither, if they choose some other, she gave a lopsided grin, then I'll go west, As I always said, there's more of the world than thrones and crowns. She straightened, nudged the dying coals with a stick, sending sparks swirling skyward. Promise me something, Jon. Anything? When the realm tears at you, when banners pull north and south and east. Remember the Night King's end. You slew him because you fought for the living, not for power. Don't let councils and crowns muffle that. He clasped her forearm. Stark to stark, ice in their veins. I swear it. Dawn nudged frost crystals from the parapets when a horn sounded on Winterfell's east road. Gray smoke curled upward. The signal riders had returned from the south. Jon met them just inside the gate, Daenerys beside him in a silver-lined cloak that shimmered like dawnlit snow. Their breath plumed in the crisp air as the rider, a young Manderly bannerman, slid from the saddle. "Word from King's Landing," he gasped, tugging off a gauntlet to produce a sealed parchment. "Lord Tyrion has convened an emergency council of lords. They gather within a moon's turn to determine succession and the fate of Queen Cersei. The Iron Bank's envoy already demands assurance of stable rule." Daenerys' jaw tightened. So soon? They're afraid the realm will break without a monarch. Bam! Jon clenched the scroll. Or do they fear dragons and wolves together more than they ever feared a dead queen? He turned to the rider. "Rest. You rode hard." The young man bowed, stumbling toward the stables where grooms waited with hot mash and blankets. Jon cracked the wax. Tyrion's seal. Inside, neat lines spelled out the situation. Lords Tyrell, Tully, Glover, Ronwood, Royce, and even a Greyjoy envoy had pledged to send delegates. Edric Dane represented Dornish interests. Davos had set sail already to treat with Storm's End, and the Iron Bank offered loan forgiveness on generous terms should a fiscally reliable crown be installed. Tyrion's postscript read in smaller hand. "If we do not present them a plan, they will find one. And we may not like the head they choose to crown." Jon exhaled through his nose. "We ride south tomorrow." Daenerys studied him. "Some will call me foreign tyrant. Some will call you usurper. We go into a pit of lions, then let's feed them truth and hope they choke on lies." He rolled the parchment and slid it into his belt. "Sansa rides as my envoy. Brienne will guard Cersei until the trial. Arya." He paused. "Arya will do what Arya does." Daenerys' lips tugged upward, half a smile, half concern. "And what of the dragons? Drogon cannot perch at Harrenhal while lords debate. Let him patrol the King's Road," Jon suggested. "Remind the realm what peace cost us to win." She nodded, gaze drifting skyward as though she saw Drogon's silhouette even now. "And Viserion. With Ghost." Jon's grin was faint. "They get on well." "Die." A breath of laughter escaped her, but then seriousness settled again. Dawn's pale light made her eyes enormous, like pieces of twilight. "When the lords ask which of us seeks the crown, what do we say?" Jon's stomach twitched. "That neither of us seeks it, though both are willing if the realm demands." She searched his face. "And if they split? Half for you, half for me. We'll bind the halves together with vows." Color touched her cheeks, not entirely from the cold. She drew cloak tighter. "Then may the gods give our tongues silver and our hearts iron." 3 days later, banners flapped above Harrenhal's blackened towers. The Wolf of Stark, the Dragon of Targaryen, the Rose of Tyrell revived under Lady Talla, the Trout of Tully, the Sun Spear of Dorne, the Gilded Kraken of a reluctant Asha Greyjoy, and many more. The great ruined castle, its melted towers like fists grasping at heaven, served as neutral ground. No one called it home, and its vast hall could seat 1,000. Jon arrived first, Viserion shrieking overhead, snow swirling from wings as he landed in the courtyard where shattered dragon-fused stone still bore scorch marks centuries old. Lords craned necks. Some flinched. Others whispered awe. Tyrion met Jon at the steps, expression half grave, half relieved. "You're a full day early. Best to greet guests rather than be greeted," Jon said. "Who's inside?" "The Iron Bank envoys. Lord Euronwood, with a dozen Dornish knights. Lord Glover, he's already drunk, And Sir Davos, who has aged 10 years handling them. Tyrion blew into his hands, visible breath curling. They all want answers about Cersei, the crown, and who pays for the mess. Jon glanced at the charred towers. They chose a ruin to decide the realm's fate. Poetic. Tyrion's lips curved. In Westeros, all politics is ash eventually. Inside, rough-hewn benches lined a hall wide enough to fit a warship. Fires flickered in braziers spaced along cracked pillars. The roof gaped in places, revealing slate sky and occasional flurries. Yet lords packed the room shoulder to shoulder, draped in pelts and silks alike. Some wore swords. Most wore suspicion. At the far end, a raised dais held 3 thrones cobbled from local timber. Temporary honors for speakers while final decisions were made. Jon felt all eyes pivot as he strode up the center aisle. Northern boots echoed. Shaggy fur swung from his shoulders. He bowed his head to the assembly. Muted murmurs rose. Targaryen? The king in the north? Tyrion hopped onto the dais and thumped a staff against the floor. Lords and ladies of the realm, he called, voice carrying. I present Jon Stark, once Snow, called Targaryen by blood of Rhaegar, breaker of the Night King. In the absence of a crowned monarch, he convenes this great council. Let us speak plainly, resolve swiftly, and leave with fewer corpses than we arrived. A ripple of uneasy chuckles. Jon faced them. Heartbeat steady as a smith's hammer. I call this council not to seize a throne, he began. Voice pitched low yet carrying in hush. But to ensure the peace won at Winterfell endures. Queen Cersei sits bound at Winterfell, awaiting judgment. Her children are gone, her debts are legion, but vengeance begets vengeance. I ask this council, what justice serves the living? A roar of voices. Lord Glover bellowed for her head. Lord Royce demanded trial by combat. Tala Tyrell urged compassion, citing seeds of reconstruction needing planting. Asha Greyjoy smirked and proposed ransoming Cersei to Essos slavers to pay creditors. The Dornish delegation argued among themselves about precedents set by Maegor's purges. Jon listened, face carved of winter stone. He let them tire, then raised a hand. Silence peeled back in wary ripples. If we shed blood on these stones, the realm will follow. Cersei Lannister commands no armies now. She commands only stories. Let her live, bound to the Silent Sisters, tending field hospitals and rebuilding villages. Let small folk see the proud lioness bend her back in humble toil. That is justice. The realm can watch. Madame so. Murmurs of surprise. Some approving, others outraged. Tyrion's brows rose. He scribbled notes. Before dissent could swell, another horn blast, echoing through broken windows. Doors groaned, swinging wide. Daenerys Targaryen entered flanked by Missandei and Grey Worm. She wore riding leathers of black and red, but no crown, no armor. Her silver hair flowed loose. She walked alone, meeting each lord's eyes in turn. Some bowed, others glowered. She paused beside Jon, nodded to the assembly. Many of you fought beside me at Meereen, at Dragonstone, at Winterfell, she said. You know my fire, and you know my mercy. I come not to claim my birthright today, but to ensure my people may grow old beneath peaceful skies. If Westeros will have me as queen, I will serve. If you choose another, I will serve still, as protector of the realm until roads are safe and granaries full. Her words stunned even the scribe scratching minutes. An Iron Bank envoy, a gaunt man with parchment-thin cheeks, rose. Protector implies regency. Who then is rightful sovereign? Jon inhaled. That is why we gather, to choose without sword or fire. Lord Royce rose, heavy brows knit. Only a Targaryen has dragon blood, and the North will rise for Jon Stark. Asha Greyjoy lifted a hand. House Greyjoy seeks a sovereign who grants the Iron Islands free trade and minimal tariffs. Murmurs of laughter. The Iron Bank envoy pursed lips, jotting. Edric Dane stood. Dorne will bend knee to none who deny us Prince Oberyn's daughters their due lands and rights. Voices rose again. Grievances, demands, promises. Tyrion slammed his staff thrice. Enough. We drafted a charter to steer this debate. Read it, argue it, amend it. But heed this. The dead nearly wiped us from the ledger of history. Let us not write our own extinction through bickering. And now, 2 days ground by beneath Harrenhal's frost-bitten rafters. Delegates split into blocks. Northern Crownlands, Reach, Dorne, Iron Islands, Vale, Riverlands, Stormlands. Each demanded concessions. At night, Jon and Daenerys met before a hearth in a half-collapsed solar, quills scratching as they redrafted compromise after compromise. Land grants for unsullied veterans in the Reach, free ports for Greyjoy traders at Maidenpool, Dornish inheritance amendments, a royal council with representatives from every region. On the third morning, Tyrion presented the final proposal. A dual monarchy bound by marriage, with rotation of small council seats to prevent dominance by any one region. The Iron Throne itself would be melted, its metal refashioned into agricultural tools, and the steel for a new fleet warding the northern seas. In place of a single throne, 2 carved chairs of weirwood and blackwood would flank a table of polished dragonstone. Law would be drafted jointly, requiring unanimous assent from both monarchs and a simple majority of the regional council. Taxes would be halved for 10 years, repaid by withdrawing garrisons from certain castles and selling crown lands, estates seized by the Baratheons. Lords debated another day. Threats growled, alliances shifted. And on a crisp, dawn-gilded pale rose, they voted. The Vale and Riverlands backed Jon. Dorne and parts of the Reach backed Daenerys. The Stormlands, Iron Islands, and Crownlands abstained, demanding further guarantees. A deadlock loomed until Lady Tala Tyrell stunned the chamber, standing to announce, "House Tyrell casts both our votes for the Union. Let wolves and dragons guard each other, else the flowers will never bloom." The motion passed. Wolf and dragon to wed, to reign, to rebuild. Jon's knees felt weak. Relief, fear, gratitude, longing all nodded. He looked to Daenerys atop the dais. Her eyes shimmered. Starlight, tears. She inclined her head, a vow sealed in silence before a crowd. Tyrion banged his staff. Then, by will of lords present, and the voice of the people carried by their bannermen, we declare the first day of the new moon, the beginning of the reunited reign. May dragons guard fields, wolves guard halls, and may this realm know more harvest than war. Cheers erupted, ragged, uncertain, then swelling. Horns blared. In that roar, Jon felt the tremor of vast change. Preparations for the coronation, or, as Tyrion dubbed it, the uncoronation, moved with dizzying speed. Harrenhal smiths stoked forges day and night to melt chunks of the Iron Throne shipped north under unsullied guard. Squires ferried cracked shields and odd swords from castle armories to supplement metal for plows. Septons drafted vows blending of northern solemnities with the Valyrian language of old. Weirwood saplings transplanted from the Isle of Faces were swaddled in sacks of damp moss, bound for King's Landing to stand sentinel in a yet unbuilt courtyard. Meanwhile, Daenerys and Jon traveled the King's Road south. A slow procession meant to reassure war-scarred villages. Drogon and Viserion wheeled overhead by day, but nested at night so their shadows would not startle farmers. Along the route, small folk lined ditches, presenting loaves and woven garlands. Some knelt, some simply stared. Many had never seen a queen nor a dragon. Children reached to stroke Ghost's shaggy fur as he patted guard near Jon's mare. The dire wolf endured their awe with lupine dignity. At Maidenpool, they found Westeros' first plague camp in decades. Pox and flux sweeping refugees after Cersei's wildfire panic. Daenerys dismounted without hesitation, lifting children into wagon beds. Her white cloak soon smeared with fever sweat. Jon followed, ordering healers to draw ice-cold water from the Direflow for poultices. When night chilled the fevered air, Dragonfire warmed stones to keep the sick from freezing. The next morning, seeing Viserion's golden flame easing children's shivers, The village reeve knelt on mud-spattered knees and pledged 3 years' tithe to the tandem crown, a phrase that soon spread downriver. Rumors moved faster than ravens, that the Wolf King fed plague orphans, that the Dragon Queen wept over burnt fields, that both knelt before aging mothers who had lost sons to both undead and living armies. And from each rumor sprouted fresh loyalty. Yet not all met them with bread and cheers. At Sow's Horn, a remnant band of Golden Lion loyalists ambushed the column, slaying 3 Mormont archers before Drogon's Landing tremor shattered courage and sent them fleeing into pine woods. Grey Worm led the pursuit, merciless, returning with prisoners who would one day serve rebuilding crews instead of gallows. On the banks of the Blackwater, a mile from the city walls, Jon watched carp break the river's glossy surface, while Daenerys scanned the sky where wyverns seemed to swim among clouds. King's Landing still stank of old battle, though new timbers rose, and fresh cloth banners fluttered over rebuilt homes. The city awaited its twin rulers. A meadow atop Viserion Hill was chosen for the ceremony, wide enough for crowds, far from still-scorched streets. Craftsmen erected a simple dais of layered cedar, salvaged from a half-sunk Pentoshi lugger. At its center stood the new seats, one of weirwood carved by Winterfell carpenters, its arms shaped like howling direwolves. The other of dark blackwood polished to mirror sheen, engraved with subtle flame motifs. Neither loomed above the crowd, both sat barely higher than a common bench, symbol over spectacle. The morning sun climbed behind gull-fretted clouds as lords and small folk assembled, septons in pale robes, northern shamans in gray, the warlocks of Qarth in shimmering indigo. They converged, curiosity outrunning doctrine. Musicians from Bravos tuned strings whose laments drifted on sea wind. Bread vendors hawked brown loaves. Dornish wine flowed like blood-red creeks between blankets spread on grass. For the first time in memory, King's Landing smelled more of cinnamon and wine than fear. Jon approached from the north road, ghost at heel. A hush rippled outward, until even gull shrieks faded. He wore simple, stark blacks, no crown, sword at hip. Across the meadow Daenerys appeared, astride a white mare whose mane streamed. She dismounted, cloak rippling. She too wore no crown, only a torque of Valyrian steel at her throat, forged from a nail of Balerion's skull. They met before the seats. Tyrion stepped forward, scroll in hand. "Before gods old and new," he began, "before the living and the dead honored this past winter, we ask, who here claims right to rule?" Silence, vast as sky. Jon spoke first. "I claim no birthright save that given by those who live beneath these banners. I swear to guard their peace." Daenerys' voice followed, clear. "I claim no crown save the one shared with every heart that beats free of chains. I swear to shield their hope." Tyrion turned to the lords. "Do you consent to these rulers, bound in equal measure? Guided by counsel?" One by one banners dipped. The trout, the rose, the falcon, the sunspear. Even the kraken, though grudgingly. Last, the golden lion of Lannister bowed, clutched in Jaime's prosthetic hand, the Kingslayer having ridden south quietly in the night to offer final loyalty from a line now broken. Then Tyrion turned to the crowd. "And do you, the people of Westeros, consent?" A roar, jubilant and raw. Fishermen thumped staves, bakers waved peels. Children shrieked. From the ramparts above the city, 1,000 green leaves rained. Fresh sprigs of bay and olive plucked at dawn, signaling peace. Tyrion bowed, then produced a plain iron circlet. He set it on the cedar dais between the seats. "This crown represents the burden you choose to share. May you carry it lightly, and may it never harden your hearts." Jon picked up the circlet, stared at the hammered band. No jewels, no swords. He extended it to Daenerys. She placed her hand atop his. Together they raised it overhead. A gale of cheers shattered the last quiet. But instead of placing the crown upon a head, they lowered it, hooking it over a carved hook at the back of the dais. Empty, symbolic. The lords murmured, startled. Tyrion's eyes gleamed. Jon faced the assembly. This crown will rest here, unclaimed, until the realm demands its wearer rise in times of dire need. In peace, we lead together. Should war come, we stand as one blade. Daenerys added, "Let no child starve because a ruler coveted jewels. Let no widow freeze because a queen sought marble halls. If we fail in this, take up that crown and cast us out." Then the crowd hushed, absorbing oath given not to gods but to them. A baker burst into tears. A knight crossed himself. Tyrion lifted his staff in salute. "Long live the reunited realm," he cried. Gulls wheeled overhead as horns brayed. Drogon and Viserion descended, wings sending cloaks flapping, banners snapping. They landed behind the dais like living mountains, tails coiling. Children screamed delight, not terror. Jon stroked Viserion's golden muzzle. Daenerys laid a hand on Drogon's jaw. Two dragons bowed their heads, as if acknowledging something vaster than blood instinct. In the hours that followed, pardons were signed. For sellswords who surrendered swords for plows. For gold cloaks who swore to patrol trade roads. For wildling clans who pledged to guide merchants north of the wall in summers to come. Cersei Lannister was led forth in a coarse gray robe, hair cropped blunt. She stood before the dais, eyes dark hollows. Jon pronounced sentence. 15 years labor overseeing orphanages to be built in the ruins of Flea Bottom. She laughed, a brittle sound quickly swallowed by hush, and was led away. Later, as sun slid west, Jon and Daenerys climbed the ramparts overlooking Blackwater Bay. Wind tugged their cloaks. Ships raised new flags. Wolf dragon entwined around a sheaf of wheat, symbol of harvest guarded by fire and fang. Below, Tyrion supervised demolition crews dismantling the last scorched spire of the Red Keep. The rubble would be used as foundation for a hospital. Farther out, on the tide, rafts carried melted sword metal to foundries upriver. The clang of hammers drifted on sea air, a percussion that promised anvil instead of battlefield. Daenerys leaned on the parapet. "The realm thinks peace has been won." "Peace is grown," Jon said. "Planted each day." She studied him sidelong. "Do you regret not wearing the crown?" "No." He watched orange light glitter on wave crests. "A crown cannot keep winter away. A farmer's plow might, though." Her laughter was quiet. "You sound like your father. Or maybe Ned Stark finally sounds like a Targaryen." Wind braided silence between them. At last, she turned fully. "We have bound our people with words. Tonight, shall we bind them with vows?" He caught her meaning, not treaties, but a wedding. Moonlight painted her skin opaline. His heart, long burdened by swords and ghosts, found a moment to beat simply. "Tonight," he agreed. The ceremony unfolded beneath lanterns, strung between half-rebuilt arches of the old sept courtyard. Septons intoned the seven. A northern shaman scattered snowmelt water representing the old god's blessing. Nisande read Valyrian vows, her accent soft and rolling. The rings were plain bronze, coins once minted for King Robert, melted and recast into circles. Jon slid one onto Daenerys' finger. She placed the second on his. Ghost sat sentinel, tail thumping. Drogon and Viserion roared overhead at the kiss, sparks bursting from their throats like fireworks, startling yet jubilant. Afterward, feasting spilled through lantern-lit streets. Tables loaded with Dornish peppers and rich cheeses. Northern stews, honey wine casks cracked open, ironborn fried eel, lemon cakes enough to satisfy even Sansa, who, for once, smiled without reserve. Arya slipped away before dessert. Spotted last atop the city walls staring west, needle at her hip. Gendry followed, calling her name. Somewhere, a new story began. In the wee hours, Jon and Daenerys slipped from the revels toward Maegor's tower, now gutted, slated for rebuilding into a library. They climbed shattered stairs to a balcony where starlight dusted stone. Below, King's Landing glowed with torchlight, a constellation of hope. Daenerys shivered when wind cut from the east. Jon clasped her hands, warmed them between his. "Cold? Alive," she whispered. She rested forehead against his. "Tell me we will remember this when harvests fail, when council squabbles. We will remember," he promised. "And when memory fades, ghost will bite me." She laughed, breath clouding. "And Drogon will nudge me toward mercy." A bell tolled midnight, the first shift for City Watch sworn that day to serve both small folk and crown equally. Jon drew Daenerys close. Above, the dragons circled once, their shapes eclipsing constellations. Jon looked up. "Do you suppose they dream?" She followed his gaze. Off skies yet unsung. Beneath them, the city exhaled. Homes exhaling hearth smoke. Streets humming with half-drunk lullabies. It was a fragile peace, but it was theirs. Jon thought of the Night King's shattering, of crowns hung unused, of small hands clutching loaves offered free. For the first time, the weight he carried felt like something he might bear. He lifted Daenerys' hand, brushed his lips across her knuckles. "To dawn, my queen," she corrected gently, eyes shining. "To dawn, my king." Together they watched the horizon where the faintest silver betrayed the promise of another new day, neither wholly peaceful nor wholly perilous, but theirs to shape with sweat and stubbornness. And as first light kissed the bay, two dragons roared their greeting, a sound that echoed off waves and walls alike, neither war cry nor warning, but an anthem for a world reborn.